I'm getting excited about it because I could imagine people doing this. Like AI is presenting you with the options to explore, and then you put your rucksack on and you go fucking explore them. And then you come back or you write your story in the process of exploring that. AI could be really useful there because if you have a writer's room with people from your culture, you will be thinking in similar ways, but let it challenge us. But in order to do that, it has to wake up from the Western bias, from the gender bias, from all the bias you can collect when you siphon internet. So how that problem will be solved, I have zero idea. But it needs to be solved for AI to be useful in that way, because it will go to obvious places.
Hi everyone, my name is Balázs Kégel, and this is the iScientist podcast, home of artificial intelligence, body and soul. And I'm really excited today to host Tatjana Samopjan. Tatjana is a creative storytelling coach and speaker, and she works with writers, but mainly she works with organizations who want to hire the writers to help them in selecting the best stories that they want to produce. So welcome, Tatjana. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm so happy that you're here, and there's so many topics I want to explore to tour your mind. I looked at a couple of your presentations on the internet about storytelling and AI, and how AI affects this space. I hope to explore instead of explain, as you say in one of your talks. And I think in the tech community we are really enthusiastic about AI in terms of cognitive science or learning about intelligence. This whole research started like that. We want to recreate intelligence, but we have much less information about how it affects the people who are using it, who are not inside the tech community but in the creative community, especially of course with GPT in the writing space, and Midjourney and DALL-E in the image space. But we are researchers, so I'm personally very open and very curious to learn about it. It's fascinating how creative writers start to use GPT, all the fears around it, etc. So in one of your talks, you mentioned that you can't talk about AI without talking about AI, because it's basically what we need to understand is not necessarily the technical aspects of how to use GPT, but about storytelling and what are stories about, and why we are fascinating about stories, and what makes somebody a good writer. So these are the topics that I want to explore first, and of course we'll weave in the AI because it's coming from all kind of angles. So my first question or set of questions would be around stories. So we are all fascinated by stories, even those who are researchers or scientists who work in a space where things are sort of frozen, not necessarily have a history. We still go to movies, we go to theater, and we enjoy the stories. So why are we fascinated with stories, and what makes a good story?
Well, that's been explained many times in different ways. They provide some sort of coherence in the experience, so oftentimes an inspiration about what's possible, cathartic release, about the feelings of sadness, or just sense of being lost and alienated. You can recognize yourself in characters. So there is a sense of resonance between your experience and what's out there presented to you, which makes you feel seen, connected to other human beings. So they provide really a sense of connection to others. And a very passive sense of connection is a safe way to connect. You're receiving it and you feel like I'm part of this human family in a way. But most of all, they organize our experiences, and oftentimes they reduce them pretty powerfully. From the fullness of the lived experience, stories will boil it down to some sort of narrative that we follow, usually without questioning it a lot. So stories can both open us up to life and really program us in a way that we live just following scripts. that are keep continuously reinforced and reinforced. So much like AI could be a double-edged sword or any type of technology. So I think one of the prime technologies of human race is story. And it's the one ways I define story is mechanism from emotional manipulation. That is what a story is. If it's not manipulating your emotions, it's doing nothing. It's a poor story. So there is a sort of mechanic there that's meant to take you by the nose and lead you where it wants to lead you. And depending on the complexity of story, what it is rooted in what kind of experience, really the richness of the experience that gives it inspiration. It can be a wholesome experience to be led that way, or it can be quite a harrowing experience. It can do many, many things, but for sure it will manipulate. You will not, none of us are meant to remain neutral when engaging with a story. We're all meant to kind of be pushed one way or the other by the story.
So it generates anger, it can generate anger, it can generate fear, horror movies or happiness.
Things, yeah. And usually it will also want to invite to the worldview it's presenting. It's also a mechanism for convincing, to drawing you in through emotions, to like emotional reinforcement, to see the things the way the story is, to frame the world the way the story is presenting to you, and to kind of course, depending on the capacity of the viewer or the reader to step back, we can question stories, but really skilled storytellers are masters of manipulation, whether they do it consciously or unconsciously, but it's the kind of description of the job.
It reminds me to so many things, but in one of the presentations you say good stories should be not realistic but true to life.
Yeah, I see it.
And that's when I try to explain it to somebody, it's really, because they look like synonyms, but they are not, right?
Realism is really trying to capture what it is that we are describing, what it is that we are seeing. For example, our time, we will try to really present it as it is. If we try to present something from 100 years ago, we would try to keep every detail of it. That's realism, and it can be completely fabricated in its content. It can have all the trappings of the outer realism, but not feel true to life, to actually how people are in the situation you're presenting. And I usually use the example of a lot of old Startrek episodes, like the psychologically charged ones. They are completely unrealistic in the setup, but when it comes to how people react to certain situations when pressed, and how do they solve problems, and how do they connect, and how do they engage with each other, it's completely true to life, for better and worse. So they really, in 45-minute episodes, they sometimes can really present such richness that we fail to achieve with 10-hour series nowadays. And I remain fascinated by that writing and that those shows. So they are true to life, but not realistic. So science fiction can be true to life as well.
Or even cartoons.
And realistic stories can be really like not true to life in many ways.
Yeah. You also said somewhere that the dramatic real stories are rarely good.
Yeah. Sometimes I use examples of stories about war and becoming a refugee, because there's such drama there already, and you would expect it to be engaging. But a lot of time, these stories are more didactic than true to life. They're really there to make a point, to make you feel a certain way. And depending on if how skilled they are done, sure, you can get along for the ride, but there are some stories that don't treat war or becoming a refugee as a thing in and of itself. It's just something that's happening. They don't have many opinions. Like the writer will not have too many opinions in advance about what the situation is, and they will explore what can happen there. And suddenly, very unexpected things may happen to characters that you just didn't see coming in that crazy situation. They will not go for the obvious stuff. They will kind of, even if the situation is highly pressured, there will be spaces for silence and connection and play and craziness, which is what happens in life, even in pressured situations. And anybody who's been through that will kind of testify that, yes, it can be absolutely nightmarish. And then suddenly it switches to something completely different. So supported by life experience, usually those kind of stories become more interesting than written just about how we think war is, how we think anything is really. So not writing from preconceptions, but writing really from curiosity about what lived experience can offer that we don't see coming.
Yeah, I mean, it relates to a little bit to GPT. Because you know the way it works, it just tries to predict the next word from context. And I lived through the 20 years where in the beginning it was just trying to predict the next word from the last two words, because the computation capacity wasn't there to have a bigger context. And of course they were very silly. But they looked like, you know, the terms were okay because the three words were somehow coherent, but the sentences were like not going nowhere. And then gradually it was built up. So it started to produce grammatically correct sentences. That was a big step. A lot of people didn't believe that it was possible because we tried to do it like top-down linguistics, grammar, and then suddenly these really dumb technologies, because it's basically just trying to predict the next word from the context. It started to produce meaningful sentences, but the paragraphs were still going from nowhere to nowhere. And a lot of us believe that it will stay somewhere there. It's not possible to have like a storyline, a coherent storyline built word by word. And so, but then when they work, what they do is basically they have a probability distribution over the vocabulary given the context, which means you have a vocabulary of 1 million or 50,000, depends. But in every time when I speak, you expect the next word coming from your model of language, but also word, like what do I want to say, right? And then I say something. It shouldn't be, if it's something that you didn't expect, you have a really big surprise. And this is where it relates to what you told about the interesting story, that the storyline is like a sequence of tokens, basically, and then something surprising happens. If it happens too much, you get lost.
Yeah.
Right? If it's if there is only one word, it always chooses the most probable word, and it's boring, and it doesn't convey any new information. So basically, when we speak, you expect about 10 words at every slot on average. So that's like a cognitive scientific factor that we measure. And then it boils down to something I want to tell you. And then that actually conveys you information, because I select one of the words out of the 10, which is information. And then you see what I want to say. But if I start speaking completely improbable words one after the other, it goes nowhere. Well, so this is where I want to get, actually. That you have like a knob that you can set to more uniform or less uniform, and it's actually a knob in GPT, that you can set
to weirdness.
Exactly how creative it is. But somehow it still doesn't capture for me creativity. So it gives you more surprises, but not necessarily an interesting story.
Well, it's not an unhinged random surprise. What is like one of the axioms of information theory that I remember from way back at uni? The value of a datum is in inverse proportion to its predictability, right? The less you expect something, the more interesting it is, the more valuable it is.
Exactly.
And this is what captures attention. Right. Even in a theory that says information is divorced from meaning, it still looks from something that will be meaningful to you when it captures your attention. However you define meaningful or no, information without or with meaning, it will look for something new and fresh. So when we create, sometimes I give a lot of like specific examples when I work with writers. And I say this is going too linearly. Like your story is linear and it goes to all the predictable places, and life can be like that, but very often it isn't. Like, have you ever had an experience in the line with this, what you're writing, that kind of shook you, just presented something new to you? And if they have lived through some things, if they kind of align what they're writing with the experience, and I don't mean just biographically, there's like a great spectrum of alignment, but thematically, there should be an alignment in some way, so that you're not writing just something from you pick up something and because it's cool and it's in the air right now in the culture, but you actually have some personal resonance with it. Usually there will be stuff from life. Life will unfold even during the writing period in ways that feeds into story by bringing something new and fresh. But if the person is writing totally from just making stuff up, the mind is so oversaturated with stories that it will go to all the predictable places. So we have layers and layers and layers of just media-fed storytelling into us for hundreds of years, but decades intensely. And I don't think people in the 70s and 60s had the same problem, creatives, that people have today. It just, even 80s, even 90s, even maybe, but for the past 20 years, this has just been getting worse and worse. So what my work often boils down to is some sort of excavation of the origin of the story that's kind of just taking away the layers of other stories that the person is not even aware are there, because they've become the part of the mind already. And we are not like, people want to have original stories in terms of, no, this has never been told and seen, but life tends to unfold in pretty predictable phases for most people. So it's not that we need to live completely bonker lives to be interesting, but we need to freshly engage with the lived experience, and the originality comes from that. When you rediscover life for yourself, you don't just take what you're been imbibed with, what's imbibed in your, like already in your system, but you kind of you leave that aside and you rediscover even the obvious again. Then stuff can happen that's interesting to present to others. But it takes an alignment of living and writing, living and creating at the same time, so that you pay attention to what's actually happening in your daily experience, and that enriches the story. So these two like life and job are not separated. And then to do that well, it requires a lot of self-awareness, a lot of ability to experience and witness the experience at the same time without getting too immersed in it, without getting, on the other hand, not getting into your head about it either, intellectualize it too soon. So there is a sweet spot of experiencing and witnessing it. So there is like some space between. You can still have some view over what's going on, but you're not creating a story about it immediately. So you're not getting into a narrative
so
too
it's
soon.
like a dance of
Yeah,
being inside and
inside
looking
and
at
out, and you really stay attuned. You live fully. Most of all, you feel fully whatever is happening, and you become really curious about what's this? What about this reaction is really pre-programmed inside me? Were there choices about the reaction? How? Because usually what's boring in stories is characters who are results of their past. I cannot tell how boring that is. Like, okay, they lost a child, that's why they're like this. I don't know, their parent didn't love them because my mom dropped me. That was, I remember Alan Watts talks about, I'm like this because my mom dropped me when I was a child. And she was like that because her mom dropped her. And for sure, I mean, traumas and all of that affects us, but life is lived in the now. And there is something about the choices we do in the moment that really are not the past. There's something that we actually do now that creates troubles for us. So that I'm curious about, how is this character in the now, not just what happened to them when they were like 5 years old or even yesterday, to be honest. So there's a lot of programming about past influencing present in the culture. We are living in such cultural moment that it's very rarely questioned, and it leads to predictable stories when people are mostly, the characters become, and people, it's characters represent how we see each other, really. They become like symptomatic reactions to their traumas, like typical symptomatic reactions to their traumas. And I'm like, oh Jesus, this is boring. Then the character is too predictable, and the trauma is leading to the story, not the moment.
One of the things I'm still wondering about, is what do we know what makes a story good? And if we do, why is it that I can count on my one hand the interesting series of the last 20 years? But it's not zero either.
No, I know.
So you have like 5 series. We all know about all those 5 series. The latest one is Yellowstone for me.
Yeah, I loved it. I showed Yellowstone to writers I was working with just because it comes from such a different value system than most progressive Westerners, you know, the left wing, and it kind of shows the logic of the other side. That usually in culture, especially in American, you know, they're called almost unwashed masses, the people who voted for Trump, even though in the series they didn't, you know, they make it really clear that these are not the characters that would vote for Trump, but they do present the conservative America. But they also tell you a story about what's worth preserving. Why are they conservative? Is there something that's worth conserving in the times of just relentless progress? And it's done in a nuanced way a lot of the time. You kind of get where they are coming from, and absolutely not something you can dismiss. So it's a challenge for a typical European 30-something screenwriter to engage with that, because it's a completely alien world. It really
But
is.
yet, I'm from Hungary, Eastern Europe. I have to admit, I spent a semester in Bozeman.
Mm-hmm.
So that really resonated with me in 93, when that was the year, I think, when they put the wolves back in Yellowstone.
Cool.
I mean, the connection is just crazy. But still, even beyond that, I'm not an American. I don't, participate in these culture wars.
Exactly.
Yet, it's a really interesting story. It's the bad guys are not typically bad. The good guys are not. You don't even know in the beginning who is good, who is bad. There is no, like, there are some real bad guys just to get the story going. But
it goes sometimes to obvious places, and then it surprises you. So it was, yeah, it was written with care, I would say. So I threw it in as an example of a story recently, and I showed it to my class of writers. Yeah, but there are not too many. Even I don't watch as much as I used to, because I read so many scripts and everything in mind. Like, I don't watch for fun anymore. And if I have free time, I do other things that have nothing to do with me losing my eyesight on scripts anymore. So I try to do stuff that just isn't about reading and
so,
watching.
Taylor Sheridan, who's the writer of the story, he had a new series called Lioness that we watched with Bear. It's good, but not 5-star good. So I'm thinking, like, even the same person doesn't know what made that story good and cannot repeat exactly the same quality. And this is where I'm getting interested in what you said about AI, because one of the things you said is that you talked about the average and how average is okay, but just don't expect to get paid for it anymore.
Yeah.
The thing is, I'm not sure if we can produce those 5 series if we don't have the space to write also the average and make a living of it. So how is it going to? I mean, give a little context of what you meant by that, and maybe let's speculate, like, how the world will unfold.
Well, I can share my first encounter with ChatGPT in December last year, just when it showed up, and it became open for the public, and it was really funny because it wasn't average in my first interaction. It was actually really interesting. It was in later interactions that I discovered, but my first interaction with it was amazing. So I was with a friend who is an academic researcher. She lectures about AI as well. And we had it opened on the screen, but we were just talking to each other, and we ended up talking about war and us growing up as refugees. We both come from former Yugoslavia. We both live in Sweden. And suddenly, when you have these conversations with friends, you think but you go to places you never shared before. And we really connected. We didn't know things about each other, like what we went through in detail. And it was really quite emotional when we were like crying and laughing, because some of the situations we remember were hilarious. Like, you wouldn't expect them to happen in war and when you're on flight, but they did. So we were sharing about that. And then because both of us have a background as we study languages and all that, we said, well, we were refugees, but now there's this word migrants. What's the difference between a refugee and a migrant, really? So we went to ChatGPT, okay, it defined the difference, and it did a pretty good job. And then I don't even remember how we came to that. We just wrote, we looked at each other and said, okay, write us a joke about migrants. And it goes into its politically correct mode immediately. Said, migration is not something to joke about. Millions of people are being dislocated every year because of the war, hunger, blah, 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 climate change. And we go like, yeah. We are migrants and we like joking about it. Go ahead and write us a joke. And it goes, okay, how does a migrant take their coffee to go? And it was brilliant. I mean, it was in all its simplicity. It was to the point, like it was a good freaking joke. So I came home like, let me see what this thing can do. So I remember sitting here and okay, let me take something I know really well. Then I go like, okay, write me a new episode of Sherlock. In Stephen Moffat style, the creator, one of them, Mark Gatiss, Stephen Moffat style. And I want the plot to be based on Hawaii. And I want the killers to be a pair of Siamese twins. And I want Sherlock not to want to work on the case. And that was about the prompting I gave it. And immediately, zoom, completely coherent story, which was a blend of, well, vague, obvious stuff and absolute brilliance. Because you know what it did? It goes, I said, give me Siamese twins as murderers. He said, one of the twins is a murderer. The other one doesn't know about it. And you go, I love this. And immediately it gives you something that I didn't see it come. It wasn't even on my mind. So a good writer will know what to do with that. It actually immediately pushed the story to the level that I would immediately take it to thematically be about the ambivalence and the cacophony inside of us. So these twins, there is a Siamese twin inside. We have the split needs. We have split agendas oftentimes. Just take the basic need for closeness and autonomy that's in most people. Like, I want to be in an intimate relationship, but I need my space, and it's never the right moment to have both, and we live these things pretty regularly. So you could actually make a story, a good writer would make that story about something real and use those twins, play around with the twins, but the twins will really, really show a deeper inside, like internal twist that any given person can experience on any given day. So I would know what to do with it. Like, I played with it, there was it. And I realized you don't need a writer's room for this. Actually, it was in the style of the writer I asked. And if your job is to add episodes on an already existing franchise or IP that's established, really, you can get really far with this and one or two gifted writers. You don't need as many others. The whole machinery around creation will shrink, and it's happening already. So to say that it's just average and it kind of subpar to humans, I don't think so. It can actually be the skilled human can do a lot with it. An average writer won't do much with it. It will end up being average, of course, depending on who is using it. But I wouldn't dismiss just how much more quickly and in how many more interesting places stories can
No,
go.
that's exactly. I'm not saying I'm not dismissing it either. It's in the direction you're saying, is that it will shrink the body of writers, and
Absolutely.
then since there is some kind of randomness in who's producing the great story or the great series,
we have a
if we
huge
shrink,
bloated industry. Everybody and their uncle is writing series and films. Like, I always let me backtrack a little when you ask what a good story is, and I usually go back to a formula I heard ascribed to Borges. Even somewhere he probably wrote, but I can't find it, even though I have all of his writings. It says art equals fire plus algebra. And if we think art in the term of storytelling, especially serial storytelling that I work a lot with, I find art to be, this is my own definition for our times. I don't think it's applicable to 30 years ago, but for our times, I would say that art is a type of series that makes you want to stop watching and engage back with your life. So it kind of pulls you back to life. So even though there are many gimmicks inside to keep you, like Netflix will keep you, you will know when you're kind of encountered something with a lot of substance, you will take a break and you will carry that story with you and you will engage with the next one again, or you will watch it and rewatch it because there is so much stuff that it resonates with you. You can't shake it off, and it brings you back, it wakes you up to your own life. That's the good definition of art.
It's transformative.
It's transformative, it's awakening, it's entertaining, but it's not entertainment. It actually makes you more alive, it makes you more awake. It doesn't distract you, it doesn't, you know, there's the phrase, we will entertain ourselves to death. It doesn't do that. So it makes you want to consume less. It's not kind of pulling you into more and more storytelling, just enough storytelling to kind of become interesting in your own life experience. Go live. And then come back and watch something, but go live, you know. That would be a good definition of art in this context to me. So it's not there to produce, there to keep you glued to the screen. There is a deeper resonance there. Even though the writers, the creators maybe would want everybody to keep, but there is too much substance there for easy consumption. Then fire and algebra, like art equals fire plus algebra. Algebra really is about the skill. And it knowing that, you know, in science, 1 + 1 = 2 every time. In creative endeavors, 1 + 1 can be 55, but not without knowing how to get there. So it's not random. There are rules and regulations and internal logic to things, and you can get to 55 or 132, whatever. But there is logic inside it. When you unpack it, it will not be completely random. So learning that craft and learning to understand the implications, the implicit level of logic in stories takes a little bit of time. You know, people get better at it, and that's something that can be learned, actually. There are like screenwriting schools and storytelling, all of that can be trained even to get better at it. But then we have the fire plus algebra, and that blew my mind just when I started discovering that the difference between skilled people, both, like if I have two writers, both are good at algebra, they really know the craft, but one is brilliant and one is not, but both are good. So what's the difference? And the difference is in the fire. And then what's that fire all about? And obviously it wasn't just one person is more inspired and they have more passion. I mean, maybe, but that's not the main thing. The fire I learned to understand in a different way. It has a metaphysical component to it. And the best way I know how to explain it is if you kind of find the common denominator between children and mystics. You know, that children and mystics have that capacity to see reality as it is without too many preconceptions about it. So when a child discovered something, and I've observed this with my niece and nephew, my two turbo twins, they're always in my lectures. I always learn something from them. But when they were small, they would just get obsessed with things, you know, something, this day, but had a pretty long obsessions with chickens at one point when they were about 4 years old. And I just saw how engaged they were with every singular chicken. Like they were not a category of animal. They were, every single one was a thing in and of itself, a fluffy animal. Each one had a personality. They observed their relationship. They could tell, look at what did they do today? And it lasted for quite a while. So there is something with them engaging with what they were encountering without too many concepts about it. There were no concepts. They were just them and the chickens.
And the flow.
And then I would come back to visit them because they live in Switzerland. I would come there like 6 months later or something. And that was completely gone. Because if I would take them to I took them to the same place and said, oh, there are your chickens now. They're bigger now. They're like, it's a chicken. And that alive thing became a concept. So that stands for every chicken. And that kind of process we get with learning languages, in their case, many languages because they live in Switzerland, but just when we acquire language, there's something, we get more overview over the world we are in, but also less connection to it.
Yeah, we lose resolution because we create concepts that contain a lot of individual things.
Exactly. And a good artist is a person who is able to recapture that seeing, like almost go back to the child, like, what am I seeing? And forget what they know about it to rediscover it. And it can be about really anything. Like people, when they learn how to draw, You know, they make me first like, can you really see what you are drawing? Can you see everything that there is there to see, like in a literal way? And then you can kind of symbolically connected, figuratively connected to other things as well, like emotions and what does this mean? And then it becomes, a hand becomes an octopus or whatever. But to engage with that hand first on its own is an art in itself. Like, can you see properly this hand? And, you know, when you go into alternate states of consciousness through meditation or through taking plant medicine or anything that can like put you there, trance or and then you look at your own hand and it's like you've never seen it before. That's a beautiful.
Yeah. So I have so many things I want to say here, because one of them is, we know from cognitive science that the way we work is not, we know that we have a prediction engine inside of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that prediction engine is very important to filter information, because if it wasn't there, you would be overwhelmed by all the senses that you have. But this prediction engine is generative.
Mm-hmm.
You basically recreate in your mind what is going to happen, and then you can tolerate a little bit of difference between what really happens and what you predict to happen. And that signal, the error signal between those two, goes up. And sometimes it goes up a little bit and then it goes back down, because your hand knows how to handle that uncertainty that it touched without actually thinking about it. And if it's really important for the organism, it goes up right to your consciousness and you have to deal with it. And if it's too much, you can even freeze, right? Fear is about not having too much surprise, too much on top of the surprise, too much danger. So dangerous surprise that can threaten your life. And if it's really too much, you go into freeze or other states. So that's one of the things I wanted to say, because it's like the stories almost play on this vertical dimension of surprise and predictiveness.
Yeah, predictability and surprise. But I say the value of a datum in an inverse proportion to its predictability. A story that doesn't present anything new in a situation that you kind of understand. The premise you understand, but if nothing that's shown is new, and I don't mean like tricks of the like plot, you know, they show up from, but genuinely new perceptions, they're just too shallow to remember. You've seen so many like them. They're just they're not making us alert enough back to, after we've seen them, we are not more alert to life, we are less alert to life, because they've kind of just confirmed what we already know, and it dulls us, it kind of numbs us out a little bit, you know, like Pink Floyd says, oh, you've become comfortably numb. And stories that come through screens are a big part of that, getting comfortably numb, because they reinforce the known just too easily. And nobody's doing this on purpose, I would say. It just what happens. It takes a lot for a person to cultivate the fire in the eyes. You know, they say that mystics and children have fire in their eyes because the fire burns away through the predictable, like concepts that are too settled. And it's really uncomfortable. The children are completely terrified all the time by news, like they don't know what they are seeing. Everything can scare them, but even it takes a lot to step out of that comfort zone. And that's why having spaces of absolute silence and spaces where you train to hold a lot of contradiction and paradox in your own experience help them when you're actually creating something, to invite all of these things in the creative process. So not everybody can do it. It takes a lot. I mean, it's not a question of intelligence. This is what fascinates me the most. I've worked with very, very intelligent people, very intelligent, very educated people who write absolutely predictable, even below average stuff. I've written with people who maybe, you know, let's say Forrest Gump, my friend told me, that's so Forrest Gump again. And remember when he says, I'm not smart, but I know love. And there is something about that, people don't have to be the smartest one, but they simply have the attunement to the moment, and they can capture stuff. So you need a certain level of intelligence to structure, for example, a TV show, but because it's quite a task. So, but you don't have to be an Einstein to do it. There are other layers of human capacity, or other aspects of human capacity that need to be invited in. So intelligence is overrated in many cases when it comes to creating something that resonates with people deeply, I would say, in our society in general.
So there was another thing that was coming into my mind while you were saying this, it's Christianity. So when I look at the Trinity, one of the corners of the Trinity is the embodiment by Jesus. And that fascinates me, the whole concept. And one reason why it's so hard for me to accept Christianity is because it's so particular. Like, it's not possible that it's really happened, you know? And basically you cannot become a Christian without accepting that it really happened.
At face value,
yeah, exactly. And actually, I've been thinking about it, what it means, face value, literal or not literal, because that's one of the point of the story, that it makes you think about literal or not literal, not being a distinction. But what I see in that is that, you know, the way we know Christianity and the way historically it grew out of a lot of things, it's not the same thing. And basically what happened there historically, that there was a lot of mystics, a lot of thinkers who were orbiting around this Neoplatonistic system that didn't have any story. I mean, it had the, like, sort of like how the world got created through emanation, but it wasn't really like a story that you could relate to. These were like very smart people trying to think about why things are, right? But this was not something that you could have made a system of that would have resonated with people. So then this complicated metaphysics got
boiled down,
embodied, and made particular by the stories in the Bible. And so, and the reason why those stories are so powerful is because they somehow very particular, but they connect you to the transcendent. And so
these stories are not that many.
Exactly.
Myth, and they survived through eons, it seems. Like, the story we mostly see on televisions are sometimes echoes of that, but very poor echoes of that, because they don't capture the full scope. They don't point to the full scope of the lived experience. So you say that these stories point to the transcendental. That's the absolute possibility, is to be fully here and to be fully a part of something that has no body. Like, and you can experience that actually in a very lived way. It's not an idea, it's not something you imagine. You can have these experiences that take you there. But if you've never had them, and then you write stories about you don't have a clue. You can't tell a story that will point in that direction. And this is something that I'm looking at very much now when we talk about storytelling and AI. We assume just like AI is dropping into this neutral situation where we are human, we happy-go-lucky human beings, fully fledged in their capacity, really, and then just AI now comes to disrupt or add to it, you know. But we really have to, for a moment, stop and see, where were we just the day before AI hit the public? Like, where were we in our capacity to even perceive the life in its fullness? So are we as good as full perception, or a lot of capacities we have, as we were 200 years ago? Are we more? Are we less? In many ways, we are less. In many ways, we are just atrophying continuously because of the way we live, and over reliance on technology, for sure is atrophying capacity that exists in us, but we are just not using it enough anymore. So when somebody says Google Maps didn't affect our orientation capacity, are you joking? People can, like, even when they look around, they hit the building in front of them, like, or the street lights. So it's myself. It's fascinating how it gets stunted and how it atrophies so quickly. And I remember just being in the US, not having GPS, driving a car, my phone was not working, and suddenly, out of nowhere, the ability to orient with the mountains, with stars, like, how did I know how to find my way home and I was really in Colorado, in the mountains, alone, dark, no lights, no towns. I didn't even know where I was going, and somehow I did. That will never stop to fascinate me. And then when I'm here in Stockholm, I got completely lost all the time. Get completely lost all the time with my phone. So there is absolutely something that we are not using. Not something, a lot of things that we are not using. And I often analyze stories like how much of the spectrum of the human capacity are they even expressing? Because they usually are quite narrow in what they're quite psychological, quite narrow. People are burdened by their psychologies, but there is something bigger than our freaking psychologies happening. We are part of a bigger system, and our psychologies are just, I don't know, a way we perceive it, but it's not more than that. So stories are not really doing life justice, I would say, a lot of the time. But those that do, they survive a lot longer. And they're usually quite simple. In a way, they don't have short. To be, they can be quite short, and still hit it completely, because they are distillation of a lot of experience, I would say.
Actually. So when John Verrakit talks about this, he says that the only modern myth that was invented from scratch is the zombie.
Yeah, cool.
And both him and Jonathan Pajot has thinking and has been thinking about this and writing about it, and it fascinates me because usually when people try to put a metaphor on AI, they say the golem, like this machine-like thing that depends on us, but it's somehow stronger than us. But I think the zombie is a better metaphor.
And they applied to AI. That's funny. I would apply it first to human beings of today.
Of course.
And
but that's exactly where I'm going with this.
Of that. And it's a product of of where we are now.
Yeah,
it's a curious thing that we kind of are happy to not notice what is being lost in our capacity, embodied capacity, and we are busying ourselves creating new ways of engaging with the world through AI. But like stuff that's already available is being lost. So we will need crutches very soon to help us go through the world, and we will need AI to assist us to do anything, I would say.
Yeah. So I call it the high functioning zombie, actually, because you don't see it from far. It's like the high functioning X, autism, or where you actually learn to deal with it, but inside you have that emptiness, but to the outside you can show that you're normal,
functional. Absolutely.
And basically the zombie is a disintegrating body. So even its cells are disconnecting from each other, and it itself disconnects from the world, except for this narrow scope of the food that it has to consume. And all the others, the zombies don't form a community. They go in the same direction, but nothing happening between them, right? So of course the myth was created because it somehow reflects
it does reflect a tendency, and when you listen to people presenting Metaverse as a playground for us to be, when we kind of find that we don't have much to contribute anymore, and we will be entertained to death, as they say, and that's an offer. Disembodied, hooked up, like your mind hooked up into the world that somebody's created. I can't imagine more insulting scenario. Like, who are you to create a world for me? Who died and made you God? To even imagine what would be enough for a human being to experience, like the creators of Metaverse, is the hubris beyond belief, I would say. Just to believe that, game creators, I think they really.
I mean the Metaverse is the 11-year-old Mark Zuckerberg dream, why he was sitting in class and dreaming about being somewhere else.
And a lot of the time when you listen to interviews, it's interesting when two things I will say. When you say those like 5 big TV series, the golden age of television, the complex stories, I was really fascinated with the people who created them, like how about their lives, like what was happening there to give birth to this. And there was always a parallel story actually lived in their life, real experiences that were transmuted into a story, but thematically they were the same. So when I lecture, I give example. This is what Deadwood is. This is what The Wire is. This, like, these things happen to these people, and not in you can't see the biographical connection too easily, but on the level of theme, absolutely they were going through these things. And then because they were creative, they created stories that were more interesting to watch than if they literally told about their lives. They created characters that were more interesting than a screenwriter as a character. That's what a writer will do. But when they are connected, the resonance is there. And I believe that a lot of the time you can see this. I even, when I started researching AI, and I also have, like, I started doing this even when I was doing my thesis at university. I wrote about chaos theory in literature, and chaos theory somehow, like information theory, complexity theory, and chaos theory helped me understand complex novels. So I kind of connected those two fields, and that somehow very easily led to transhumanism. I don't know how I ended up in those waters, but even in my 20s, I was like really interested in like what are the root ideas that govern AI research, like what is there that hopes to happen. And what are these people all about? And I mean, Ray Kurzweil, even then he was creepy. Even then he was popping pills like crazy. And this was 20 years ago. He was like, I'm going to live until the fear of death, the fear of the body was so obvious in so many of them. So when you say brilliant art has a resonance with the life of the person creating it, also these products like Facebook has resonance with this person's understanding of friendship or lack thereof. And I don't really remember the name anymore of the AI product that made waves months ago, that had people really get hooked into AI partners. So this was already happening. It's not even like a year ahead. In the future, it has been happening for a while. So I might check up the name of the company. I don't remember it anymore. But the woman who created it lost a friend, and she couldn't deal with the loss. So she fed all the conversations, all the SMS into the AI to get a version of him. And apparently it was enough for her to keep him alive. She kept communicating with him. And other people wanted the same thing. My mom died, my child died, and it started from there, and it evolved into this service for companionship. And very soon people get really hooked, and it turned into the sexual services as well. Of course, textual sexual services or pictures with us, but very quickly it derailed. And when they because ethically it was so corrupt that it couldn't be worse than that, what it was doing to people, but people were already hooked into it. So when they switched it off, it created a lot of uproar because they really didn't have that in their own lives.
This
So
is the story of her, right?
Yeah,
the movie.
exactly. So it was a terrible substitute. And but you can see that this person, she wasn't somebody who accepted that. She protested again. Like her product is a kind of expression of a whole. Her product responds to the whole. So a person who understood deep nuances of friendship would have never created Facebook, because quantitatively connecting, like collecting people and imagining that will create a lot of friends. This is what people found out. Like you still have 5 friends maybe after all of that collecting. So these products, it's usually interesting to say what is giving rise to them. What are they an answer to? What kind of need are they an answer to? The person who is creating them, how comfortable are they in life, being alive? Can they suffer pain? That is the human condition. Are they accepting the human condition or not? And I believe a lot of people in the AI are not. They're suffering.
No, I completely agree. Yet, what's surprising to me is that if I look at all the leaders, I would say I trust Mark Zuckerberg the most.
Oh,
No, he is in jujitsu. And I also went into jujitsu. It's an interesting story because it's related to Facebook. I often talk about this, where I got hooked on short videos on Facebook.
I remember that.
And so that was an addiction which pushed me to get rid of Facebook on my phone and go to try it, because somehow therapeutically I understood that sort of like this, the feed that I'm getting, it's my subconscious. It's a projection. It's so open. It's algorithmic, and the algorithm gives me back whatever I want when I'm half asleep. And it tells me something, and you can do something with it. So since then I'm telling to everyone that you can use TikTok therapeutically, like you analyze your feed as a gym, and you can do something with it. So then that pushed me into jujitsu. Then I learned that actually Zuckerberg is into this. So there was this big story that Musk and Mark Zuckerberg wanted to have a fight, a cage fight, and didn't go anywhere because Mark actually took it seriously, and for Musk it was more like a publicity stunt, I guess. But Mark Zuckerberg is really into this embodied sport. And
Well,
so it seems to me that like his metaverse dream is somehow his childhood self projecting something.
yeah.
But there's so much money sunk into that he can't get out of it. I'm pretty sure that somewhere he knows that it's a dead end.
And something, it would be a very damaging experience for many people inside it. Like when it comes to kind of living fully as a human being, that doesn't seem to be offering that much opportunity. There was an interesting documentary on Swedish television, and such an unpretentious little documentary made for the youth canal. It wasn't even youth channel. Not a big deal. You will not find it on Netflix or anywhere. But they were just examining two schools of thought around schools. So you have completely digital Swedish school that gives iPads, no books, nothing to small kids already, and they are gamifying the learning process, and it engages the boys. They are getting better at school. They are seeing results because we are educating a new generation of people for the new world, and they have a whole philosophy around that, which is entirely computerized and digital. And then there is this other school. No, nothing digital whatsoever. There is only one computer in the school, and it belongs to the headmaster. No teachers, no children, nobody with a computer, only pen, paper, books. And the school is in the Silicon Valley. It's very expensive. And the only children who go there are the children of the tech developers at Facebook and Google. And it was stated, it was just shown, it was not commented in the documentary, like, deal with this fact. They will not put their children anywhere close the products they themselves are creating. And it kind of, I rest my case. It was really poignant. It was
in Social Dilemma, it was...
Yeah, they said several of them. But these people already opted out. These were the people who were still making. So it's the way a person's mind can rationalize that what I do for a living and how that is okay. And I'm just doing my little task and I can't possibly be a bad guy. But many, many small contributions all over the system. And these are just your regular people creating damage, not, we imagine these malicious minds, but I feel the most damage is done by just ordinary people doing their jobs.
Yeah, I completely agree with it, and this is for me the big paradox. There was a big Twitter discussion on this. Is that the big fear is this exterminating AI, singularity, catastrophic, exponential growth, which is basically the zombie.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's a highly intelligent thing that can solve very complicated problems much better, much faster than us. So that's why it's so scary. At the same time, it's so stupid that it doesn't see that, for example, if it makes paper clips out of human flesh, that's not a good idea. Even though his goal is to make as many paper clips as he can, maybe there is a limit to that. Because
I understand what you mean. I completely understand the logic and illogic of it at the same time. That narrative is there. I think it's good that it's there, just in case, nobody knows. I think that's the only thing we can say about the future development of AI is that nobody knows what's going to happen, because it can take many different directions. Because of all the black box issue is fascinating to me. Like, we can make it do stuff, we don't know how it does what it does. That in and of itself should be as alarming as hell. Like, there really is a process inside, an internal logic that is completely different than the human logic. If we can't understand it, we can't predict either way what's going to happen. So I personally, if it happens, well, goodbye us. I would say there's not much we can do about it. So I'm not pretty worried about it. But there are many steps on the way, even dealing with narrow AI and the damage that the narrow AI can create.
Exactly.
If general AI appears, it would just simply take over those tools and take over.
But it's not going to happen out of nothing.
I know, but narrow AI is problematic and in and of itself.
Exactly, but the thing is that since we put this danger out there, and now even like the Prime Minister of UK is talking about it, and Biden just had a decree saying that now all big models will have to be registered with the US government.
Personally, I find that any type of this, like all kinds of discussions needs to be had about the AI, because it's such an unknown entity, and the alien nature of its processes is fascinating. Like it really, I had an image in my mind, like let's take just large language models that are kind of siphoning everything that's written on the internet. And I had an image of a lotto machine. You know, it siphons those little balls of content, of kind of coherent material. And it's at the same time a lotto machine, but inside it has a shredder. And it shreds it to bits and pieces, but it doesn't even shred it to like strings of something that we can recognize as a small part of. Like tokens are not meaningful to us. Tokens are not syllables or letters. Tokens are, what are they, you know? And then it reassembles them in completely its own way. Stuff that comes out is, well, this looks like shiny. A lotto ball, but this thing, what the hell is this thing? But apparently it makes sense through that process. So that kind of mystery is fascinating. I think we need to be humble about it, and really stay curious and completely explorative about it, not declarative. It's too soon to declare anything about AI. And I find like we have these extremes in the US, we want to shut it all completely down. But in Europe, let's be the early adopters of, like, there is absolutely no talk about the issues in our industry, for example. Especially Sweden is the early adopter of anything technological. We want to compete. And with my friends who are high-level executives in other industries, they say it's such a race to adopt AI into theirs, like integrated into their service, out of pure fear about being left behind. So there is no conversation whatsoever at high level of management, no conversation about any possible downsides. So they're like fear-driven narratives on both sides. Like, let's stop this thing, let's completely integrate it, because then we will be competitive. While I find it, calm down, take it in, explore it. If we could slow it down enough to understand it better, that would be better.
No, I'm all for exploration.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the social media AI, it's been there for 15 years. And
not giving us happy results in so many.
Yeah, exactly. And GPT is not the first AI we encounter.
But the social media algorithms are not improving on themselves.
They are.
Are they?
Yes,
like, can they really communicate? I don't know. What I understand with this is that the possibility of self-improvement and self-replication that may give us new phenomena when it comes to technology. Like, we didn't have technology that really does that the same way.
No. It's just classical AI, but I don't know how to say it. It's been always there. It always learns about your desires, but those desires, you can separate in your mind. When I'm half sleepy at night, I have different desires from the day after, and this is why Facebook failed at optimizing the feed to me, because they did something that hijacked my crocodile mind and didn't take into consideration that I will wake up and my frontal lobe gets in control, which sort of like a meta phenomenon can look at this and say the only thing I can do with addiction is just not buy it, because if it's there when I need it, I will take it, so I just delete it from the phone. So and so that kind of addictive AI is there. And TikTok, which is eating like the brain of the next generation, it was built on the technology. So that's the first one, because on especially YouTube, I like the recommendation algorithm, because it's sort of like a historical thing that has a lot of layers, and because it is not optimal, it's good. it gives me things that
enough. Yeah, it's kind of
but
bad enough.
TikTok really just
Yeah.
connects to you, and whatever
Mm.
your finger tells it, it will optimize it. And this is
And
in
that's,
front. This is in front of us, and it's going really bad, I think.
I think because this our experience with social media algorithms was so bad and problematic on so many levels, and mental health issue and political polarization, all of that has been hugely aided by these technologies. It wouldn't have never happened that quickly and that badly without it. So I think with AI and the effect it has on the mind, individual and collective, we should take it like really slow and seriously and look at it in a more mature way, because we just didn't do any of that with social media. We just adopted it. And what's kind of stuck with me, what makes me uneasy about AI is probably that it is one of the most suggestive technologies ever invented, and what it will attack, like when it gets integrated into most of the devices and most of the apps, or even if apps will even exist soon, whatever will exist, it will leave no room for not knowing what to do next. It will suggest you a solution. So there will be no unassisted thinking. It will assist our thinking, and there can be profound consequences to that. It is on the surface, as everything with these technologies, on the surface it makes our lives more efficient, convenient, we quicker get to things, but efficient, convenient, and quicker has not proven to give us happiness collectively and individually. Like, we can really question those narratives profoundly now, to see that, okay, we have tools that make it even more like that. Do we really need that as much as we think? Or people don't, like average person, if they are, they don't want more. We are like already have tired minds. We already have oversaturated minds. The last thing we know we need is more content. The last field we know is more whispering to us, more attacking our eyes. Like,
yes,
technology that give us space and quiet would be much welcome, but it's not the technologies we are building.
Yeah, no, and my nightmare scenario is not the singularity, is that generative AI will be unified with social media AI. And so you basically, now you go to Netflix, you have recommendation algorithms that gives you some movies or series to watch. At least we are not watching it at the same time as when it was television. Because when we watched it at the same time, the day after we went to school and we talked about it, and it became like the object of connection. Right now, it's not that, because anybody can watch any series anytime. But at least it's like a finite number of products. And the big ones, at least, are good enough to spread everywhere. But I can imagine now technologically a scenario where you go to Netflix and it just binds to your mind, whatever, it can be just perceptual, but I don't know, Neuralink.
It's been tracking your behavior.
Exactly, and it gives
you a story for the moment.
Your personalized video.
Personalized storytelling is definitely going to happen, and there are like companies already working on that. So I could put myself in that episode on Sherlock as a main character. I could be the murderer, the victim, the Sherlock himself, and a storytelling AI could generate a story pretty quickly. Now we are seeing it can generate video. It's still not that great.
But it's really getting there.
With images, it's amazing. And I mean, when children's stories, okay, let's just keep it to the children. It does stuff you can't really tell that it's not written by people. So let's not be arrogant about how much higher above AI we are as creatives. We are not. So it's doing a pretty good job. So I'm imagining really a pretty autistic world we are heading towards.
Yeah,
so
this is the zombie. This is the zombie.
Yeah, that's the apocalypse.
Right? Because it will exactly. It will completely disconnect us.
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to throw a bomb or invent a virus or whatever. This is the way it's going on. This prophecy will. Yeah.
Well, like if I was just talking to a friend before I went online with you, and just I told her, I realized how weird my day has been yesterday, for example. So I got up very early. I had a lot to do and stuff, like anything from paying my bills to doing administration for my company, invoicing, answering emails. I did some creative work as well. Everything was done through a screen. Then I talked to my family, and I talked to my friends as well. And I exercised in the evening. So I have 5 different screens: my phone, my iPad, my 2 computers, and my big ass white TV. So I just moved from one to the other. And even when I was taking a break, I was first doing some quiet meditation. And then there is a podcast I love that relaxes me. So even that came through my phone. I wasn't watching it, but it was speaking to me. And then I finished the evening exhausted because I was nonstop working almost, except for that little break. And I do my yoga with one of my best friends, is a yoga teacher from England. So she Zooms her classes, and I have her on my computer and on my TV, surrounded. I spent my whole day interacting with screens, with people or with texts, there was absolutely no human connection yesterday in flesh. That was such a day. Even today I went out and I talked to people in shops and people around where I live, but tomorrow I'll go to a birthday celebration. That's fine, it's beautiful, but there are days that I'm completely, and I'm not the only one, completely spending my life in front of a screen. And there is a sense of sadness that I can't even express about days spent like that. Even though I'm efficient and I'm in connection, and I'm thinking, I myself, I like speaking about these things because I really feel them. It's an embodied process. It's not like something I just have big ideas about. I actually live as a recipient of this technology and a user, and I'm being used by it, it seems to me, more and more. So there was a conversation I had years ago with my dad. I just talked to him yesterday about it. He lives in Belgrade and he goes to the post office to pay his bills. Yeah, I remember when I told him, like, Dad, I don't need to go to anywhere to pay my bills anymore. Everything is done on my computer and my phone. And he said something, oh, that's awful. I said, no, it's really convenient. And it really went in, I think maybe 5 years it took from this is convenient to I'm completely locked in technology for everything I live. And I live in one of the most highly technological countries in the world. Sweden, we don't even have cash money and everything is digital. So I went from liking it to being absolutely horrified by how my life sometimes look. I travel a lot for work, and I connect with people, but then I come home and my work is a lot on screen. My family is in 3 different countries. My friends are spread all over Europe and America. I have, of course, some life here where I live, but because of the nature of this traveling life, a lot of my life is somewhere else. And of course, technology made that connection possible, but it also makes it completely disembodied. So after having a lot of these types of conversation with friends and family, when we actually meet, and that's why I travel so much, I meet people, I put myself on the plane and I meet and they come and visit. It takes a while to connect in a fuller way because you just relate to the words first. And then there is something about the smell of the person and just how they are in other dimensions that are not even, you can't even say what it is, who knows what we perceive with our full senses. And it breaks you down, it cracks you open. But it's not an automatic thing. It takes a little while to get there, to really look in somebody's eyes. And I feel a lot of that is getting atrophied. So yeah, I find myself to be a guinea pig as much as anybody else for this technology, and I'm not liking it, I must say, less and less. For all the benefits it's giving me, there's stuff that's taking. And to have more suggestive technologies is not making me jump for joy, even for all. It really doesn't.
No, and especially for kids, it's terrible. Like we fight an almost impossible fight with Belle's daughters. She's 11. She doesn't have a phone, but it's almost impossible to maintain because all her friends have the phones.
Right.
And we see how the friendships disintegrate live. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And so, going back to the trauma thing, I feel like it has to be big enough, like it was for me on Facebook, to actually step out and use it for self-improvement, to make a drastic change. I mean, drastic. I
I
deleted
think that is
Facebook from my
happening
phone.
individually, and there are people are even gathering in groups and creating new lifestyles. So there is a response to this.
Exactly.
The mainstream will be captured. There is no question about it. Unless that we create a revolution against it, which will not happen. It gives enough benefits and it gives enough emotional soothing for it to placate us. It really is the biggest, like what I say, media is opium for the masses. It really is.
Passing out in front of the television in a pleasant
It
way.
really
That
does
was
that.
your words.
You're too tired to engage. It's not that you don't want, but you're too tired. So I'm really ambivalent. I made my choices in working with this industry, not to work on. And it definitely made my options smaller. And the huge money you could get working in this type of storytelling, I just stay away from it, because there is a lot of that I just don't want to contribute to. I don't want to use my mind to contribute to it. So at some level, we have to make those choices. You can still make a living, absolutely, and kind of remain in some sort of integrity by staying away from certain things. Up to a degree, if you're good at what you're doing, you will always have choices. But if you
Exactly. So I'm just wondering, like, with your skill set, you know everything about storytelling, you know a lot about AI now. So what would be some kind of, it's hard, it's paradoxical, but it will have to be an app, because that's what we saw, what that would counter this movement.
I think there are ways to kind of engage AI in storytelling in a really interesting. I would make that kind of AI. Let's make that kind of. I'll explain what I mean. People usually want to use AI as an added writer to the room, like an extra writer. I'm your staff writer or whatever. I would use it as a devil's advocate. Just to challenge the if it gets that good that it can do it. I don't know that ChatGPT is at that level yet, but all of these obvious places that we get into storytelling, I want to kind of, have you thought about this? And I don't mean in a plot sense, okay, this character can do this, not at that level, but I use these examples of stories about abortion or death penalty, where people have very kind of clear-cut opinions, and it's easy. I'm for abortion and I'm against death penalty. Well, sure, me too, but let's see, like, what can we see there that it's not obvious, and why have these things survived for so long? And it kind of all be bigotry, and like, what's the signal, what's the noise? Is there any signal in the positions that you can't accept as your own? So I would like really, AI could challenge the research process, open up new avenues for research, like go to Singapore and try to understand why they keep their death penalty, and they argue that it's still working. And their opponents, it's not uniform there either. There are people for and against it, but they seem to be saying that it's worth it to keep the crime at such low level. It's worth it. They come from a different culture, collectivistic culture. We are from West. We can't understand it. You have to kind of get out of your programming to even begin to understand their way of thinking. Then you have to understand the historical context they live in, like with the opium wars with China and the West, what was done to China through narcotics. You understand like how they like deal with it now. It's not coming out of the vacuum. So there is so much there to explore, to understand what is value of human life, singular life contra the value of many lives. So if we lower down the crime rate, like, so it's not justifying, it's not finding excuses, it's exploring, it's trying to understand the full spectrum of responses to a complex issue that human race has done. So AI could point us in directions beyond what's kind of the type of media that you would read in the West and confirm our values. And then it's up to us to walk that talk, because AI could present an options. This is what you could explore. This is what you could, but you have to go explore it. You have to meet actually some people who represent that. You have to spend some time there physically with your body. You can't just think and talk about it. Words are shallow. Words are empty. You have to be in an uncomfortable meeting with this. So a kind of, I'm getting excited about it, because I could imagine people doing this. Like, AI is presenting you with the options to explore, and then you put your rucksack on and you go fucking explore them. And then you come back or you write your story in the process of exploring that. AI could be really useful there, because if you have a writer's room with people from your culture, you will be thinking in similar ways, but let it challenge us. But in order to do that, it has to wake up from the Western bias, from the gender bias, from all the bias you can collect when you siphon internet. So how that problem will be solved, I have zero idea, but it needs to be solved for AI to be useful in that way, because it will go to obvious places.
Yeah, and especially because right now the algorithm is not doing that because it would be harmful for the bottom line, right? You would spend less time on the app.
But hypothetically, I find that these kinds of processes, not it doing my storytelling for it, making it more efficient. The first novel, Pharmaco AI, that was written like a person writing with ChatGPT 3, it took 2 years to write. And the writer really went through a process of receiving something and then living with it for a while, staying with it, and then prompting something new. So it wasn't a quick process. It wasn't like ping pong between the ChatGPT and the person. It was like, you say something, let me sit with it. So it took 2 years to write. It was an exploration of this. Like, oh, I saw how my mind works. I saw how language affects me. These are deep explorative processes, but it takes time. So anything worth doing that goes deeper will take some time, but AI will be sold to the storytelling industry as the efficiency enhancer.
As everywhere else, actually.
Yeah, and that I believe will be a problem, because it will still take time to create something, to live with something for a while, because we humans are not getting quicker just because AI is there.
Yeah, exactly. So I as you say, this, my experience with GPT, I use it for writing help. There's a pseudo write I'm using too. It slows me down.
It should. It's good.
Yeah. Because I have to think like, okay, do I really want to say this way, or nice word, I know it passively, I don't know actively, so this helps a lot in that. I'm not English originally. I'm not an English speaker, so in terms of like opening my vocabulary, it helps a lot. But do I really feel that word, and I have like 3 versions I have to read through, and I have to merge them, so it really slows me down, but I enjoy the process.
No, I believe that's the right way to do it. But it will, like, if you are paid for writing and you have the industry who expects output quickly, it will not reward slow processes. I don't think so. And I find like this is an interesting thing. Like AI can help you download all the knowledge you need, at the click of a button. You can speak all of these languages because it will speak it for you. You just do your thing and it will translate and, put your mouth moving in Chinese way and you will sign Chinese. And it makes it feel like acquiring knowledge is a download thing. You just download, like Matrix thing, you just download jujitsu. I know karate, I know jujitsu, I know Chinese. But for all of us who are multilingual, the process of learning a language means it's not just learning how to speak. A really good speaker will have fallen in love with the people who speak the language. I had a professor at the university in Belgrade who said, you will never learn another language really well and really deeply before you've loved somebody in that language. Because there are nuances that this drive to be understood and the drive to understand, there needs to be a deeper connection. So there are people who are good at business English, but they are not great speakers. They don't have their own style. They don't have their own voice. They're just good. They have the instrumental use of the language. But somebody who's had friendships in English with native speakers, after a while, your language just starts to soar. It becomes poetic because they unlock the capacity in you. Just living in Finland, for example, you have to learn that they speak in silences. This is not learning the language. This is learning the no language of Finnish language, for example. And the difference between Finnish, Swedish, and Swedish with huge differences in the way they express themselves, even though it's the same language. So not understanding what acquisition of what it takes to learn something with your body so that it's part of you. It's so much more than downloading things. Like, are you crazy? You think you speak anything that way? No, you don't. You have no clue about the culture. Have no clue about the people. So the slow process is hugely important.
It's beautiful. It's a good point to stop. I think we have a lot of territory to cover, so maybe we can have another conversation, maybe with Bea. We'll see.
Yeah, I hope
But
so. That we complete.
that would be amazing, right? Putting music, writing, and AI together.
Yes. And making it more fun for the viewers when we start dancing, and
Yes.
which we do every time we meet.
And I hope to meet you real life too.
Yeah, really soon. It's always fun to
Yes.
meet in person.
Yeah.
This is great as a bridge, but it's not where you land. You land when you meet in person, actually.
Yes.
So
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Tatjana. It was a great pleasure, and I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of questions that I didn't ask, but it was just free flowing into the directions that were really nice. And it's so nice to finish on this point on love, because I think it's really, knowing by loving is, the
learning
way
by
of
loving.
loving or loving. This is where AI is not even on the radar for AI. This kind of knowing. So we have a lot, if we want to get there, there's a lot of
You may
research to
fall
do.
in love with other AIs. Who knows?
Yeah.
What do we know? I wouldn't dismiss any of that. That black box things tells me that we don't know enough to mystery is there. The mystery is there. So we'll see what happens.
But we know there's nothing there. So in a certain
There is
sense, we
nothing
know this is pure projection, whatever you think it.
But when you go deep inside a human being, you find nothing as well. There are great seas of nothingness in us. When we go deep.
Okay.
Anybody who's done meditation will tell you this. Like it's
exactly. So this is like the pure nothingness with no meditation to do. It's in front of you.
It's part. It arises out of this world. I wouldn't dismiss anything
that's true.
It arises out of this universe. This element, everything is. We operate with what's there, and it's part of it. So I don't even know what artificial means. It's part of planet Earth. How can it be artificial? Like But I just don't want it to suggest too many things on any given day. To me, I need my space to think and to just be quiet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Tatjana.
Big hug to you both.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.